welcome to the District 5 School Board Forum for the Oklahoma City Public Schools. My name is Jabbar Shumate. I am Vice President of Community Convening and Social Justice for the Oklahoma City Urban League. The Oklahoma City Urban League is one of the oldest, this nation's oldest, civil rights organizations that focus on social services. In the Oklahoma City area, we have been in the community on the east side for over 75 years, focusing on providing quality education, workforce development and employment, housing, and community convening and social justice. I want to say that tonight is about really lifting up the high ideals we'll need to move the district forward for our students and kids. And on behalf of Dr. Valerie Thompson, who's the president and CEO, I want to welcome you all to tonight's forum. Also, it is my pleasure, and I have the high privilege and the distinct honor to introduce Ms. Nikki Nice, our Ward 7 Councilwoman for the East Side here in Oklahoma City. Nikki is the 10th woman to be elected to the Oklahoma City Council, and as well, she has served this ward with distinction, having run unopposed in 2021. She is a graduate of Northeast High School, she attended Millwood Schools, and is a graduate of the mighty Langston University, our state's only historically black college and university. And I present to you Ms. Nikki Nice.
Thank you. I got one clap. I'm just kidding. First of all, good evening to each and every one of you. It is an honor and a privilege to be with you as we discuss topics that are happening within our community and within District 5 of Oklahoma City Public Schools. Before I begin, I do want to thank the Urban League of Greater Oklahoma City for hosting this forum and for allowing me to be a part of this opportunity to hear from our candidates, and we will hear from them in just a second. And also, in honor of Women's History Month, we do want to thank Ms. Ruth Bills, our current sitting member for District 5, who is the longest member to sit for District 5, and we appreciate her for her service. Now, here's how this is going to go for everyone who is going to be watching. I will introduce you to the candidates, and they will give you their platforms for 2.5 minutes, and then we will have moderated questions. So each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and we will have a timer. We have a young lady that is timing, so they will know when their time is at 2 minutes. They will know when their time is at 3 minutes, 2 minutes, and also at 1 minute, and to stop. Okay. That's how we just got a stop sign. That means to stop. So this is what we're seeing here, so you will also be able to keep up in time yourself if you'd like to do that while you're watching. So with that, I do want to introduce our candidates so they can tell you more about themselves, and we are grateful for their presence. We have Mr. Adrian Anderson and Dr. Sharri Coleman. In the spirit of women, I hope you don't mind.
Oh, you go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to allow for the ladies to go first, so please, we will hear from our first candidate, Dr. Sharri Coleman.
Good evening. Again, my name is Dr. Sharri Coleman. I would like to say thank you to the Urban League of Oklahoma City, to Mr. Jabbar Shumate, to Councilwoman Nikki Nice, and to my opponent, Mr. Adrian Anderson. What an honor to be here this evening. I'm excited to talk about Learn to Lead, my platform, leadership, equity, accessibility, and listen, partnerships. I mentioned to Nikki Nice in the very beginning, guys, I made it to the paper today. I made it to the paper, so she said, go ahead and address this right now. I would love to say that the article that was written today about my residency, everything is okay. I lived in the district and have lived in the district for years. I was, due to Pathway to Greatness, I was out of it temporarily. Pathway to Greatness went into effect a couple of years ago, and I made the necessary steps that I needed to take to make sure that I was in compliance. I also will say that I've announced my candidacy in November. I filed in December, started my campaign in January. I've been running since then. Here we are, March 29th. And so any questions that needed to be asked should have been asked back in December. There is a rule, there is a filing time. Thank you. There is a filing time. And so We are far past that, and so I'm excited to continue the rest of this evening and talk about the issues at hand. Again, learn to leap. I'm ready to talk about our students.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharri Coleman. Now we would like to hear from our second candidate, and his name is Mr. Adrian Anderson.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Urban League, for the opportunity to come in and speak on behalf of my platform and my candidacy. Thank you, Dr. Coleman. Thank you, everybody in attendance. I appreciate the opportunity. I wanted to discuss, my platform is pretty much together we continue the work that has already been in place. And so for 14 years, I've been doing the work in Oklahoma City Public Schools. I've started off as a volunteer coach, and from there I navigated and decided that, hey, you know what? We needed a voice out there, particularly Spencer, but also representing District 5 and ultimately all district schools and the district as a whole. And so I've been doing the work, learning how to build relationships, able to communicate with district leaders, teachers, administrators, still volunteering in the schools as a behavioral health rehab specialist, learning the mental health challenges, learning the needs of our students and our families. And so I've been doing the work. I will continue to do the work, and the work speaks for itself. And so I'm thankful for the opportunity to represent District 5. Thank you.
Let's give them a round of applause for the few that we have in here. And virtually, you can put your hands together as well. First, we do want to mention that there is a Q&A for questions if you are watching this online. And we also have a YouTube that you can watch as well if you want to share that as to your platform, Urban League of Greater Oklahoma City, where you can watch. I do want to also mention that, again, we did ask for student submissions. Unfortunately, we did not have any, but if there are some students that are watching, or you have some students at home that are a part of District 5, please ask them questions so you can have them in the chat so we can make sure these candidates understand and hear from the young people about what's happening around us. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and start the questions, and I do want to also mention, serving in the role of City Council, we do work closely with the school board members, especially for our district. So I'm looking forward to working with you all in this work. The questions that I have, we're going to start with, what is your view on voucher programs and allow parents to use public funds to send their children to private schools? We didn't flip a coin, so since I had you go first for the introduction, I'm going to have you and Mr. Anderson, and then we're going to ask the same of Dr. Coleman. And you will have 2 minutes to respond.
Okay. It's no brainer for me. I do not support the voucher proposal or the Senate bill that I'm glad that did not pass. I believe that a decision was rendered on that, I believe this week, if I'm not mistaken. And so I'm against the voucher program, of course, because if it takes away from public education, then it's going to impact our kids. Me being an advocate of public education, a supporter of public education, and a recipient of a public education in Oklahoma City Public Schools, of course, I'm going to advocate for those funds to be used for public education. That also will signal that would mean that if we're looking to go to private schools, then what's the reason for doing so? And so what I would like to address, or even challenge our legislators to do, is write a bill on continue to improve funding in public education and using those funds and identifying how we can allocate more resources to preparing our children to receive a quality education through the public school system. Thank you.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Said that Senate Bill 1647, called the Oklahoma Empowerment Act, was voted down last week. It would have dedicated $128.5 million in taxpayer dollars for private school costs. which means that the schools that we're fighting for in District 5, like Martin Luther King, like Thelma Parks, Rogers, Scheidler, Willowbrook, Moon, Wheeler, Spencer Mid-High, Classen SAS, and Douglas would receive less funding than they do now. So I am glad that Senate Bill 1647 was voted down, because our monies do need to stay in public education. And we want to make sure when we discuss equity, we understand that there always less money going to our kids. And so we want to make sure that all the public funds that we can get from taxpayer money goes to meeting the needs of the children, especially here in District 5.
Thank you both. I'm going to ask this question, which I actually should have asked first. What motivates you to serve on the Board of Education? Again, what motivates you to serve on the Board of Education? And the way I'll do this is we'll go back and forth. So since we'll have you answer first.
All right.
Dr.
Yes. What motivates me to serve? One, I've taught in the classroom. I've mentioned, for those of you who've been following my Thursday Facebook Lives, I told you how 20 years ago I started my long-term substitute teaching was a class in health at Moon Middle School. And it's funny because it's come full circle, because Moon would be one of the schools that I'm representing. So I've taught in the classroom, both middle and high school, but I've also been in the community working to educate the community. I've served as a resource to various schools with teachers and students. We've partnered with schools to make sure that teachers' supplies were met, that students had the proper resources. And I've seen what happens when the community comes together, when community partners are stakeholders in how the children or the schools are advancing. So my hope is to bring all of that together, every stakeholder in at the table, to make sure that we help each child to achieve and to succeed. So my issue to serve, my concern to serve, my motivation is to serve, because listen, I know that my presence on the board will encourage others and inspire others to get involved in the future, to invest in our kids' future. And if you invest in a child today, you're investing in your own future tomorrow.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, same question.
Sure. What motivates me is, for one, to bring Oklahoma City to help and assist our leaders, our teachers, our stakeholders, to bring Oklahoma City to be a premier district, not only just in the city, or even in surrounding areas of the city, but in the state and also in the nation. I get offended. I take it personal because I'm a product of Oklahoma City when I hear or people suggest that getting an education from Oklahoma City Public School is something of subpar or average. I'm quite against that theory, because I know a lot of successful people that graduated from Oklahoma City Public Schools. I know a lot of leaders, a lot of entrepreneurs, people that are making an impact in the city. Nikki Nice is one of them. She's a graduate of Northeast High School. I'm a graduate of Oklahoma City Public Schools. And so, I take that personally. And so I want to continue to push our district to the next level, where people don't look at it and say, well, I got to take my son or my daughter to another school district or somewhere else, that you're proud to say, like I am, proud to say that your children or you attend Oklahoma City Public Schools, and that you graduated from Oklahoma City Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you both. Next question. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing our public schools right now, and what is your plan to address it? Again, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing our public schools right now, and what is your plan to address it? Mr. Anderson.
I'm after.
We'll let you parch a little bit.
I think it's obvious the pandemic is one. It's many concerns, but I'll talk about the pandemic, and I think a lot of things have been impacted based on that. And so, pandemic, and I have a child that went to Oklahoma City Public Schools, and I just remember, and all children have been affected. No question what school district they went to or attend to, but I knew it was concern about. They're out of school 3 months, then going into the summer, 6 months they were not in school. And so they were already concerns as far as where they were at, as far as academic performance. And so, you know, our concern was making sure we collaborated with teachers, see what we could do in the period of time where they were, you know, nobody could plan for the pandemic. And so, you know, we want to assist the teachers, assist the schools on whatever we can do to make sure that we address that. And then, you know, those things have had a big impact on reading proficiency and academic performance K to 12th. And so early childhood programs, you know, those things where it's important where we get in front of that instead of trying to catch up. And that's the main concern, I think, right now, is trying to catch up and bridge the gap that was created by COVID. Thank you.
Dr. Coleman.
Yes, thank you. We know that OKCPS is home to about 34,000 students that come from different backgrounds, which is broken down into 7 districts. And then out of those districts, each of us represent anywhere from 5 to 12 schools. So honestly, I do believe that I have great ideas, but I cannot enter into this position assuming that I know what's best for the entire district, or assuming that I know what's best even for the schools that I am going to represent. However, I do know that it is my responsibility to listen, to go in. Actually, I've already had 2 conversations, one with the middle school administrator and one with a mid-high administrator, and just talking about some of those needs. So part of that is making sure that I'm honed in to what the needs are for that specific school. And then the joy of having different districts is that if each board member goes out to their schools, they come back, now I can advocate for those children at the table, at the board table. And so, yes, I can give you my platform and work through it. Those are great ideas. My Learn to Leap it sounds wonderful, but we all know that communication first is about listening. So part of that is making sure that as I told my kids, that my listening ears are turned on, that I'm honed into what the needs are for administrators, for students, for the school, taking that back to the board and making sure that we together can make sure that every child's need is met within the district.
Thank you both. Next question. What particular experiences or skills have prepared you to serve as a board member? What particular experiences or skills have prepared you to serve as a board member? And we'll start with Dr. Coleman.
Thank you. As an educator, I've been inside the classroom looking out. As a parent, I've been outside of the classroom looking in. As a board member, as I just stated, I will have the opportunity to engage those worlds and to make sure that we have conversations and well thought out decisions that will allow us to bring those two entities together. I've served on other boards over the years, whether it's a medical board, whether it's for children. And so I do believe I have a background. I understand how board membership works. It will be different for education, and also knowing that we're bringing all of our different components. And again, those 34,000 students that we're all trying to represent. But yeah, I've been outside looking in, inside looking out. Now I'm excited about the opportunity to sit at the table to make sure that I effectuate change to bring those 2 worlds together.
Thank you. Anderson, same question.
As far as experiences, again, I've had many experiences within Oklahoma City Public Schools, being able to be a part of those conversations, understand the artery or the pulse of what's going on, working in Star Spencer in particular, in the Spencer School area, and being a parent, being a product. I know the needs, I know the concerns. I also know the goals and dreams. And so serving on various panels, working with our current board member, Ruth Vills, and certain initiatives, I've been able to pretty much be a part of that conversation. I've been doing the work for many years in advocating and doing things that board members are already doing. Other than just proving money to build Star Spencer or, somebody to do school, I've been doing the work. And so my experiences alone allow me to know what the need is within Oklahoma City Public Schools. One thing that I've learned that I build on is building effective relationships through positive communication. You know, one thing is to listen to the need, not just come and say, hey, and suggest this is what should be done. And so I've been able to do that and convey that information and those responses from parents, stakeholders, parents, myself being a parent. I'm able to be at the seat and firsthand know, okay, this is what we need, but also partnership with the district and saying, let's work together instead of me just, or us representing, just saying, this is what you should do. And so I believe just the work that I've been doing qualifies me to continue to at the board capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. And as we talk about both of you being parents of previous or current members of students of OKCPS, the question, what specific actions will you take to increase the role of other parents in decision-making and promoting parental involvement in the schools? Because we clearly know you all have been engaged, so how can you help make sure others are part of this process? And we're gonna start with you, Mr. Anderson.
Okay. One thing that I was able to be a part of was Learners First Initiative. Is a few years ago. I believe Robert Newell was the superintendent at that time. And one of the metrics and rubrics within that initiative was parents as real partners. And so just the term alone, parents as real partners, not parents as, you know, someone that we just reach out to when the child is maybe at a point that we need to communicate concern, or at the point that, you know, things have got out of hand in a sense, academically or behaviorally. And so bringing parents as real partners means they're at the table, we're listening to their needs, we're bringing them in and not, you know, suggesting this is what should be done and this is what you should do with your child, because parents know what's best for their children. And so through initiatives like that, community advisory boards that I worked with Ruth Villes, those boards allow parents and other stakeholders to come together and voice their opinions and even have the autonomy to decide, you know, what happens at their particular school. And so, you know, these boards were at each school, and then we were able to come together, you know, identify the needs, communicate that through Mrs. Villes, and that was communicated to the district. And so continue to either implement or reactivate initiatives like that, I think is very important, because I'm a parent and I want my voice to be heard, but I also want to partner with the district. I want to work together, and so we can move not only my child, but every child in the district to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Coleman, same question.
Yes. I have two sons. My husband and I, we have two sons, and I remember when they were in grade school, one of the things I would do is email the teacher, and there was something we always called it Team Chandler or Team Cortland, because we wanted to make sure that it was the student having a voice, that it was the teacher having the voice, but that mom and dad were home working together for the team, for the child to progress. And so it was a sign also to our boys that mom and dad had their back. Something that has been tried and true over the years is the PTA here in Oklahoma. One of the things you can do when hosting a back to school or a parent teacher conference is making sure that the PTA is accessible, that it's set up in the room, and that it's empowering for the parents. I can't remember if PTA costs, but here's part of my partnership part of the program. So if there's a community that's partnering with, or church or synagogue that's partnering with that school, then guess what? Then maybe we provide some of those fees that need to be paid. The bottom line is we want to create every incentive, every reason for a parent to get involved. Just to bring brevity to it, I was watching Abbott Elementary the other day. You all know that story. And so that the head teacher was complaining about a parent who would not come in for parent-teacher conference. And so she waited, it was after hours, and as she was getting ready to leave, she was fed up, she was making excuses. This mom never comes. The mother came in the room with scrubs and said, Well, I'm a nurse in the ER, and I don't think I could have left them to come here, but I am involved, and I thank you for participating with my child. And it just let me know, sometimes the parent may not be a nurse, but the parent may be working 2 or 3 jobs. The parent might have other kids where they can't get there necessarily. So part of that is really understanding where the parents are, understanding their needs, and then making every concession, every way that we can work together so team, whoever the child is, excels. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I can say we are all team OKCPS District 5.
That's right.
On today. So as we talk about the collective ways that we work together and some of the things that have come out of different studies as far as our OKCPS students, our black and brown students are concerned, what are your thoughts on how the district should address the disproportionate number of suspensions for those same black and brown children? Dr. Coleman.
Yes, and so I thank you. This question was hit right at the beginning of the session. So I don't know the specific details of how the district rules, but I do know this, that disproportionately from past experience, that black and brown children are oftentimes over-policed. So part of that is making sure that I'm at the board, because we will have, we have the capability to make sure that we have the rules, the statutes, all of those standards put in place. Part of what I know and part of my background in understanding black and brown children is bringing that story to the table, right? Oftentimes we say that people don't care about us. Sometimes they just need to be educated. They don't understand that this is a microaggression, that this does not fare well for black and brown children, that over-policing does not help the case, right? And so part of that, again, is going to those meetings, making sure that when that new policy comes down, or making sure that I look at the policy that's in place, because I do have to become familiar with it, look at the policy and then offer some suggestions, say, listen, you know what, this may look like a good idea on paper, but when you consider all the black and brown children in District 5, over-policing is not going to bring about a better result. How can we flip it and make sure that we are affirming our children rather than punishing them? Thank you.
Same question.
Well, when the OCR report came out that identified Oklahoma City Public Schools was suspending black and brown children at a disproportionate rate, I was invited to a code of conduct initiative that, addressed that was provided, from the district to bring in stakeholders, like myself and other community stakeholders and parents to address that issue. And so, I had the privilege of giving insight, of course, from a parent and a black person myself, to give my perspective on that. And I think, you need to know the story. You need to identify the needs. You need to really be empathetic on, okay, what are the concerns versus maybe getting it off, your one experience or somebody else, third person, or, something in society that suggests one thing or another. I think people are uninformed at some level. And I think also it needs to be more love when we shouldn't focus on color. All children should be treated the same. And so if you really hear about helping kids, if you're here to really educate children, then you remove any bias you have in concern of color or ethnicity or any background that children come from. And so that's where I will approach it from. I approach it from a love standpoint. I approach from, I'm truly here to educate kids. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. So those were some of the prepared questions that we did have for the forum, and I am encouraging those who are watching, if you have questions, please add them to the chat so we can have them asked to our participants. And if you don't mind, I did have a couple questions. So y'all,
Yes, ma'am.
y'all ready?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
When we think about District 5, and one of the things even for me as a council person working with neighborhoods, we have underutilized buildings in said neighborhoods that are within the district. So my question for you, what are your plans for those remaining underutilized buildings that we have within District 5 to make sure that we are working with the community to make it accessible, or how can we make sure they're a part of the process and the conversation?
Sure.
Mr. Anderson.
Well, being, again, a product of the community when Pathway to Greatness took place, and of course, we all know it was a lot of many school closings due to that initiative, a couple in my community. And so, honestly, when that happened, that hit personally because, that has personal ties to not only me, but my family and my community. And so within the repurpose piece of that, we continue to have conversations with the superintendent and district officials about making sure that those buildings are repurposed on behalf of the community in its best interest for the community. And so bringing the community to the table is most important. You can't make a decision, in my opinion, of that magnitude without bringing the community forward. So before any decision is made, then you have to survey, you have to bring those community stakeholders to the table, have a discussion, what is the need in this community, and then how can we best serve this community with the buildings that we have. And so, what worked out in particular with the Green Pastures is that, Green Pastures, the film is out there, film production is out there, and I think that's a thing, career path that we can start utilizing for our children. And so making decisions like that, and that will be in the best interest of education, it's still in that community, I think is the best course of action. Thank you.
Dr. Coleman, same question.
Yes. Thank you. Actually, when you mentioned the Pathway to Greatness project, what happened after that was called the final path, and it calls for about 15 of those schools to be used for repurposing. However, in my plan with partnerships, one of the things I learned throughout COVID, I had the opportunity, our church partnered with the Urban League, and we were one of the community hope centers. What we did, we realized that during the pandemic that churches, mosques, temples were underutilized. So, of course, because of the pandemic, everyone is home. On Sunday morning, the church would be open maybe with the pastor, audiovisual ministry. But during the week, nothing was being used. And so being able to partner with a community organization like the Urban League, our church was able to come together. We took our church fellowship hall, we inserted Wi-Fi, and we were able to service from about 20 to 25 students as they logged on, as they communicated with their teachers. And so part of my plan is, yes, to have those conversations about repurposing those buildings that are set, those 15 buildings that they said they were going to that they closed for repurposing, but also to re-engage the community to say, hey, you have a building that's sitting here. You can have wraparound services. There are needs that need to be met that only you can meet. So again, part of that is reaching out to the community so they are truly stakeholders in the advancement, in the excellence, and the success of our children. So building partnerships for me is what I'm excited about.
Thank you both. All right, another question that I have is, as we talked about the suspensions of our Black and brown students, I heard the conversation about arrests. So my ask and my question to you, when we think about school resource officers, and a lot of people may or may not know, when we think about school resource officers, our city, the city of Oklahoma City, contracts with Oklahoma City Public Schools for those officers to be a part of those said schools. So my question to you is, do you see a need for more school resource officers? If yes, why? If no, why? Dr. Coleman.
That's a good question. Thankful to the police, to the resource officers, but also coming from a standpoint, again, of over-policing. So it's different to have someone on campus who, if something goes down, if we need help right away, that they are there. So part of that is making sure that they're part of the partnership. I also think it's the way that we look at discipline, especially with Black and brown children. So that's going to come from the board, that's going to come from administrators, that's going to come, how do I meet the needs of the children? I say this all the time. If Johnny gets to school or Marcus gets to school at 9 o'clock and he's missed breakfast, he can't focus on the rest of the day. His attention is off. What does it look like to have that wraparound service? What does it look like to have someone who is saying, I'm concerned about you, rather than sending somebody, the teacher sending them downstairs because they're fidgety, they can't control, because they're hungry. So again, with the partnerships, if we meet that need, some of the needs of policing won't have to take place. So no, I'm not saying get rid of the resource officers. What I'm saying is utilize them. Make sure they're part of the fun things in the school as well. Because if everybody understands, from the teacher, the administrator, the parents, the child, the resource officer, that we're all working together to make you a better student, I do believe that it will be okay.
Mr. Anderson, same question.
Sure. Well, and I'll give my personal experience working at Star Spencer High School and working with a resource officer for many years. And that experience with that particular resource officer, he became a part of that staff. And so his purpose was not to impose his will or, intimidate the students. He was there to help the students ultimately. Now, there are cases, unfortunately, that his services were necessary and needed. But I think getting a plan together with the administration on the purpose of why we're here, and then implementing that resource officer in as many activities, or integrating the officer within maybe even decision-making with how we engage with students, activities that we're doing with students, which he was a part of. I mean, he became, more than an officer. And so he became probably a brother or a big uncle or a father in many cases. And so from a resource officer standpoint, from my perspective, from my experiences, again, I don't have a problem with him as long as the person is of quality. You got to make sure that officer is not there to, again, impose his will or be authoritarian, but to be a part of the staff or be an extension of the staff, to be a part of that climate, to improve the educational outcomes for those students, where we reduce those incidents where his job may be very easy, where he doesn't have anything to do but engage with students and encourage them each and every day. Thank you.
All right, I got a couple more questions here. The first, we had one that came through the Q&A, and it is, what can our district do to preserve remaining historic Black community schools within District 5? Again, what can our district do to preserve remaining historic Black community schools within District 5? Mr. Anderson.
Well, I think the schools in those communities are the cornerstone or the heartbeat of those communities. And so I've seen firsthand in my community and other communities, when those schools are closed, that displaces that community. And so especially when those schools are not repurposed, some schools are closed and then reopened, other schools are closed permanently. And so you can see the effects, the after effects of those closings in the community that it once served. And so, I think it's very important, for one, to identify, okay, why are we even thinking about closing the school in the first place? When I was on the Pathway to Greatness initiative, these are questions that I asked. Was there anything we can do to keep those schools open? And so I wasn't, privileged to understand everything as far as why we were closing schools. I know it was a lot of data that supported that. It was a lot of things that came with that. But I still, because when you close a school in a community, especially a historically Black community, it displaces that community. It has. We see the proof of it. And so I want to first say, is this necessary, or what can we do to stimulate this school or to improve the school, if, based on the reasons of why we're going to close it in the first place? Is there anything we could do before closing the school, and then having a conversation of what's the best next option? Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. We are grateful to the monuments in our community. We're grateful to the history of those places. We know many people in this room and many of you watching have filtered through some of this historic landmarks and schools. Again, that's the part of partnerships, a part of the community actually being involved and engaged in the process. We understand, as my opponent just mentioned, about the Pathway to Greatness, and there were certain reasons why they closed certain schools. Some of the things they talked about, it weren't enough children in that area for that feeder pattern, whatever the reason is. Now here we are. And so that means what? The community has to be engaged from the very beginning. And if we're a part of the partnership together, that means even when the question comes up, the community already has a foothold in it because they've been working in the school. The parents are re-engaged in the schools. The community, we're talking about equity. And so we just want to make sure the partnerships that are going to be beneficial for our children is of the community churches, mosques, temples, community centers, parents engaged in the building, but in the bodies that make up those wonderful landmarks. So again, it's not one thing. If we all get on the bandwagon now and realize that we're all community stakeholders, then I think we can hold the rest of our schools down.
Thank you. I'm starting to get more questions coming in, so I'm thankful for that. So I hope you don't mind if we can get a couple of these.
Okay.
They are some good questions. So the Oklahoma legislature continues to pass and consider legislation that limits what educators can teach in the classroom, especially related to historical lenses on culture, race, and gender. How will you protect the learning environment and ensure that history will not be watered down or erased? That's a great question. Dr. Coleman.
That is a great question. Even understanding my role as a board member, some of those things will not come into play. But I do want to mention, because everybody has been talking about CRT, and so just to make that really plain what it is, critical race theory, one, was an academic concept. It's more than 40 years old. It didn't just come in the last 5 years. The core idea of that is a social construct, and it was used by law students in the 70s and 80s. Okay? CRT is not being taught to 8th and 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds in the classroom. What has taken place is now everyone is so afraid to say anything about race, about class, so now they're staying away from that. And so that is, I say that the trick getting us to lose our focus. The focus is not CRT. That is not happening in the 5th grade classroom. A conversation about race or slavery, any of that, those are just the facts. That's history. That's not CRT. That is a legal process. And so we want to make sure that we're aware. What I will jump back on CRT, House Bill 1775, the beginning of that I think is more detrimental than all the other things, because the first part of that bill said no teacher would have to undergo diversity training. And I think that does a disservice to the teachers and to the students. So CRT is just a word that's been out there. It is not being taught to your 4th grader. So we don't have to be afraid of that. And I think once we get that understanding, I think we'll all be ready to go.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Sure. Just to echo a lot of what Dr. Coleman said on CRT, again, in my opinion, is a diversion. And of course, like stated, it is not being taught in the schools. And so we are, legally they are continue to teach history and as it has been. And so I think truly we have to, go to the diversity, inclusion, training and get more informative on those backgrounds and get more information on how we can improve. I think when you know better, you do better. And so just getting more knowledgeable about those topics ultimately helps you, providing education to your students in the classroom. And so I think we have to stay focused on what the real issues are, what the real concerns are, and making sure we're educating our children at a high level. Thank you.
All right. I said I had 2 more questions like 5 questions ago. But I think I still have like 2 more questions. So if you don't mind, I would like to ask them, what are your plans for mental health for our children and staff? This is another good question, especially with all the things that you both have said our city and our communities and our school district has gone through. So what are your plans for mental health for our children and staff? Mr. Anderson.
Well, being a behavioral rehab specialist in the schools, and I was the part that would talk about life skills, coping skills, anger management. So I think those things are important. I think based on COVID and just what we're dealing with, our entire family is impacted, and mental health is a very real thing. And mental health doesn't mean that something's wrong with you. Mental health is it's everyday life. And so just promoting the resources, advocating for more funding, more allocation to mental health programs embedded in the daily curriculum, making it more intentional on not just the children, but the families, providing those resources inside and outside the school, becoming more of a partner and more of a, the schools being a haven and a resource for our families, where those services are being provided. They're being intentional as far as an investment, if it's monetary or non-monetary, and making sure that those needs are being met. I think that needs to come as important at this moment, especially in our time now, as our educating our children, because if they're not healthy mentally, how can we expect them to perform at a high level academically? Thank you.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes. I would encourage everyone to follow the legislation, because what you'll notice over time and in the last 6 months to a year, that legislation is being passed or being put out there, so we're not focused on mental health, like social emotional learning and teaching that in the classroom and making sure that's a part of the curriculum. That is a part of mental health, right? It's saying I'm more concerned about you than just your reading, writing, and arithmetic, but I'm concerned about how you're feeling. I'm concerned about how you're interpreting what's taking place in class. So social emotional learning is very important. So what we have to do, I need to let you know this. So legislators make the laws. So I need you to stay on top of that, because once the laws go into effect, then as a school board or as a school district, then we're kind of bound to the legislation. So it's not on our side what we can do, but making sure that we're following those questions when we're talking about mental health, making sure money still goes there, making sure we're following that. And then encouraging those bodies that are in our schools already. What else do we need? And also thinking about that too. If one school needs a little more help than others, that's what equity is. Equity says wherever you are, wherever this child is, wherever this school is, I'm going to make sure that I equip you so you at least have the baseline so that you can be equal with others. That is what equity is. So social emotional learning is a part of mental health. We need to make sure we stay on top of legislators to make sure that they're passing laws that benefit our children in mental health.
Thank you. I think Dr. Coleman was looking at my paper, because equity is my next question. So I do want to talk about equity, and the reason I bring that up, because we want to increase equity in the district, and there was a question saying, I am concerned that the kids living around Classen SAS at Northeast don't have adequate access to this world-class education that is now in our community. How would you address this issue of equity for our district? Dr. Coleman.
Oh, most definitely. I love this. So there's a difference between equality and equity. Just make it real plain and simple. Equality says that everybody in this room and everybody watching will get a pair of shoes, will get access. And that sounds good. Oh, great, I get a pair of shoes. What equity says is whatever your shoe size is, I'm going to give you the pair of shoes that fits your foot. Because what does it look like? Nikki Nice, you might wear size 8. I wear size 10. Do you wear, see, we're right here. If I gave her a size 10, she would be swimming in my shoes. If she gave me a size 8, my toes would be cramped. And so we have to make sure that equity says wherever I am, equality, don't just give me what everybody else has. Determine where I am. So that means those young people in this district, that they have access. And if they need a little more help, if they need a size 8 instead of a size 10, let's make sure that we're honed in. That's what equity is. Not because what others will say is, oh, well, everybody got it. That is not true. It doesn't matter if you gave it to me, but I couldn't do anything with it. And so part of making sure, you just mentioned the youth in Classen SAS area, so that means going out and finding those students who live around. That's making sure that we're opening up access to them. So if there is an application process, that they have access to that as well. That's what equity is.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, same question.
I would just say, and looking at it myself in a personal viewpoint, I think we need to just call it what it is. There's some things that changed. Communities see, class in Northeast was Northeast at first, then it became Classen. And so, the question is, at this point now, are those kids that were in that neighborhood or in that neighborhood, are they able to have access to the same education now that, Classen students are receiving? And so Classen has always been a flagship of Oklahoma City Public Schools, which is great. And, I think we all need to aspire, to help bring all our schools to that level that is perceived, the quality education that's being received at Classen SAS at Northeast. And so, a lot of people are concerned about that, even myself, and spoke up against, for one, the conversion, and then for two, where it's going to be fair to make sure those students are afforded the same opportunities. And so, yes, equity is very important, and because we know it's areas in the districts, it's inequitable, and so we have to continue to address that and have that real conversation on identifying where it's not equity, and then making sure that those children, those communities, and those families get what they need to make sure that everyone receives a quality education, no matter where. It needs to be a philosophy. It needs to be a way of life of saying, whatever we need to do to make sure this area is getting equitable education, that's what we need to do. It's that simple. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. We had some more questions come through, so what we will do, and I'm going to ask the Urban League as well, that we make sure that our candidates get a copy of those questions, and we can make sure those questions get answered, and maybe we can put them also on the Facebook page so people will know that their questions have been answered. So my last question to you both is, what do you do for self-care? Because in this space that you're going to hold, it is not going to be an easy journey. I can tell you that right now, just from experience. So my conversation and hope for you is that you will have self-care and support. So my last question, what do you do for self-care? Mr. Anderson.
I think first, give honor to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. You have to have prayer, you have to be connected to the Bible. And then you have to have good family support as well. I think I can't do it by myself, so it starts at home. Again, not in the capacity of a board member, but, I've been advocating for the district in this capacity, as far as a community advocate, a parent, alumni, for many years. And so, getting the support of alumni, family, community stakeholders, that's important as well. Building relationships, being able to be transparent about what you really feel, what you really think, and then being able to agree to disagree and still work together. I think that's important. That transfers into knowing that, hey, it may have been a tough day, but let's get back at it. Let's try it again and be persistent, because this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so, I've been consistently doing this for 14 years. And so, Nikki, you're right. It's been times where you get frustrated. You think the district's not listening. You think maybe you're not saying the right things or you're not talking about the right items. But what I learned to know that, people are listening. You got to continue just to work together, stay with it. And again, families first, after, God, of course. And so that's where my self-care will come from. Thank you.
Dr. Coleman.
Yes. I love to be outside. So whether I'm walking my dog or if you during the summer you may have seen my husband and I on social media riding our bikes. I laughed and said, as I've been knocking on doors and having conversations with the neighbors, that I was going to ride my bike throughout the neighborhood. I haven't done that yet, but what I have done is sat on the porch and had great conversations. And so for me, just being outdoors refreshes me. Front yard, backyard, around the corner, riding bikes. I love to be outdoors. So part of that is already filtered in who I am. as an individual. So maybe we'll see if I can get on my bike and go from school to school so I can refresh in between. We might see that. But it is very important to make sure that I practice self-care. One of the things in my family, I'm the only female. My husband, 2 boys, and even a male dog. What was I thinking? But I also, they know, okay, mommy needs to go chill and watch her Hallmark. You may have seen that on my website. Give me a good Hallmark movie. Give me a good book. Give me a bike ride, and I am a happy girl. And all of that refreshes who I am so that I can think clearly. So when it's time to go in and put on the serious hat and know that I'm working for those 11 schools in our district that I'll be servicing, I will be refreshed and renewed. So MLK gets the best of me. Thelma Parks will get the best of me. Rogers, Scheidler, Willowbrook will get the best of who I am. Moon, Middle School, and Wheeler will get the best of who I am because I'm outdoors. Mid-High, Spencer, and then class and SAS at Northeast, as well as Douglas, because I'm taking care of myself and I'm well rested that I'm able to go into the boardroom and fight for those kids there.
All right, I wanted you to hear their self-care because we are human. Even as candidates and people who serve in these spaces, we are human. So I thank you both for being very candid about your self-care. So last, we're going to close, but just as we opened, we're going to close with closing remarks. So because we did allow the ladies to go first, this time closing, I'm going to allow the gentlemen to go first. And you will have 2.5 minutes for closing for both of you. Mr. Anderson.
Well, again, like I've said many times, I woke up one day and just decided, what can I do to help? What can I do to help my community? I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was getting into. I just had a passion for saying, I'm going to be part of the solution. I'm going to be part of the process. And so being a basketball player, that was the first opportunity to come back. I knew that a little bit. I felt like maybe I could be halfway successful in doing so. And so it started with coaching. From there, it just grew into, identifying and seeing like it's a need for advocation at the board level and to build those relationships with, at the time, again, Ruth Fields and, our administrators in Star Spencer and the Spencer schools, our parents, for our children. And so I decided to start going to board meetings and speaking up on our behalf. And from there, it just continued to grow, building relationships, and just continue to stay consistently on saying, whatever I can do to help our children, that's what I'm going to do. And so I wanted to change the conversation that I may have heard in the past of, we can't focus maybe on the past. We need to talk about it from a history standpoint. But what are we going to do moving forward? And so having that conversation with district leaders, with our administrators, and saying, what can we do together to build a better foundation, build better educational outcomes for our children, whatever that means. I don't know what that plays in the part that I'm my role and what I'm doing, but I told them I'm willing, I'm here, I'm willing to make a commitment, and I've done that. And so, that I will continue to do the work. I enjoy it. I'm genuinely about the kids. Thank you.
Awesome. First of all, thank you, Mr. Anderson, for the service that you have given to your students. I am grateful to have had the same opportunity to give, to put some time in, whether I was teaching at the grade school level, middle high, even now as an internship counselor in another district, teaching at the University of Oklahoma, serving as a community hope center in our church. It is all about teaching children, youth, families, how to learn to lead, right? Leadership, making sure that we're creating lifelong learners. And so I needed to find a way, because I know when those kids from here, from this area, came into our Community Hope Center, they were just looking to be loved. They were looking to be heard. And so all around the room, we had words of affirmation. And so even when a child was struggling online with their work, they could look up and say, I can do big things. And so part of that was creating that environment. So I again, want to create lifelong learners. I already told you what equity, the difference between equality and equity is. And so I want to make sure that that voice, that is always being chimed in, but also with accessibility. Many people know if a child has disabilities, but what we don't know are those invisible disabilities. And so we want to make sure that we have things in place. The 504 plan is different from an IEP. A 504 plan is something where parents, if there's a health condition, they partner with the school, with their doctors to make sure those children's needs are being met. Because just because I can't see your disability doesn't mean that it's not accurate and I need to act on that. And then again, partnerships. I can't say it enough. Partnership, partnership, partnership. My husband and I have been doing that with our church since we moved here 24 years ago. We've been partnering with the community. We've been partnering with different schools. And all I'm doing now is taking all of that and putting it together because I want to serve as a person who represents every one of my schools, every one of the parents, every administrator in District 5. So Learn to Leap is what I want to do for you all. And I thank you for this opportunity.
All right, for those who are in here and virtual, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you to you both, and also thank you to your support that is with you to help you through this journey. We do have a couple of announcements, so stay right there. We'll be right back.
Thank you all for tuning in to tonight's forum. As you can see, Oklahoma City is poised to have one of the most experienced individuals representing this district because both candidates have displayed tonight not only passion, but as well their preparation to lead our district into the future. I want to say on behalf of the Urban League family, we're so glad you tuned in and to let you know we have programs here to help the community. We are moving into some strong work in inclusive economic development. And we want you to visit our website, Urban League, www.urbanleagueok.org, and find out about our programs in inclusive economic development. We offer business certifications in retail development. We offer business certifications in warehouse and warehousing. We offer business certifications in operations around retail, and we want you to be able to get those certifications for free in partnership with the National Retail Foundation. We also are doing great work in getting our community vaccinated. In Oklahoma City, less than 35% of African Americans are vaccinated. Less than 35% of African Americans in Oklahoma City are vaccinated. We're leading the way with trying to get individuals vaccinated. We want to live healthy, safe lives. Visit our website for more information there, and also know that you can access free Medicaid in Oklahoma. We've had a Medicaid expansion in the state, and the Urban League is helping people get access to Medicaid. Please visit our website, urbanleagueok.org, and without further ado, I'll bring to you our City Councilwoman, Nikki Nice, to close us out.
Thank you. Some great things happening at the Urban League, so we appreciate them. And I was just actually checking the chat, and I would encourage both of you when this is over that you check that chat and please respond because clearly there are some things that need to be answered. I'll put it that way. As we look at voting, you have heard from our candidates. Now it's time for you to take your opinions to the polls. Early voting will be this Thursday and Friday, March 31st and April 1st from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. at the Oklahoma County Election Board. So for those of you who are not sure if you stay in District 5, now's the time to figure that out. You got at least a couple days to do that to make sure you are in District 5 and that you will be voting on those days. If not, please prepare yourselves for this coming Tuesday on April the 5th to vote 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. and find your polling place. This is very important for our communities. I just want to make sure you understand we have been through pathways to greatness. Some of us call it other things because we have yet to see some of the impacts that as far as the positive impacts that we wanted to see for our communities. So now we have new eyes that can look at these issues and help us work through those challenges as well as those opportunities for our young people within District 5. So I thank both of them for saying yes, because it's not easy to put your name on the line to say you're gonna run for office. So I do wanna commend you both for saying you wanted to run for office, and good luck to you both. And with that, we close and say thank you to all of you watching, and you can please share this. We wanna make sure people are still working through and watching this as we work towards the days of voting. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.